My name is Bert Harrill, and I'm working on a commentary project on the Epistle to the Ephesians in the New Testament. This is for the Anchor Yale Bible series, which is one of the two major commentary series in America. I am a professor of history and classics at The Ohio State University in Columbus. Well, there are many commentaries on Ephesians, as you can imagine. And in fact, the commentary I'm writing is to replace an older commentary written or published in 1974 by Professor Marcus Bart, who was the son of Karl Barth. And it is a fairly infamous commentary because it's 2 volumes of a text that's only about 6 or 7 pages. And it really is all about Calvinist theology for the most part. And so it really needs to be replaced, not only because the scholarship is a bit out of date, but also because his approach was not as historical, shall we say, as the series has evolved into. Well, the respect for scholarship, the intellectualism, this is all part of the German culture. And my own culture in America can be anti-intellectual. There's a famous book, I think by David Hofstadter, an American historian, talked about anti-intellectualism in American culture. You know, there's a long history going back to the 19th century political party that called itself the Know Nothing Party. I will know nothing. And I think we've got to return to this again. You know, politicians who say, I don't care about knowledge, I don't care about research. So when I came to Germany and found an entire culture that saw research as essential, not only for expanding human knowledge, but also for bettering people's lives. And I really resonated with that and fell at home with that. Well, actually, I was thinking this is my 4th time as an Alexander von Humboldt research fellow. Before that, I had come to the Goethe Institute in Germany when I finished my university studies. I spent 6 months learning German in Freiburg and in Göttingen. That was back in 1987. And so I was counting up the time I've lived in Germany, and altogether it's about 2.5 years of my life I've lived in Germany. And the reason I came to Germany to begin with is because I was a university student, and in my very first year, what we call the freshman year of college, I took a course on the historical Jesus in the religious studies department. I went to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I was in the same graduating class with Michael Jordan, the basketball player. But early on, I knew I wanted to study the New Testament. And I asked my professors, how does one do this? Because in America, you get the bachelor's first, and then you go on to get the master's PhD after your bachelor's. And they said, the first thing you need to do is to learn German. And I said, really? And he said, that's the Fachsprache. That's the language of scholarship. It's German. Germans invented the study of the New Testament, and you just need to be able to read the scholarship, or you can't be a scholar. And so for the next couple of years in college, I looked around and I asked how was the best way to learn German. I took one German class, but several people who had been to Germany and several Germans I talked to said the best way to learn German is in Germany in an immersion program. And the Goethe Institute had these 2-month immersion programs. And so when I graduated with my BA, I immediately went to Germany. And I lived in a student dormitory, and my roommate was from Italy. He was in Oberstufe. I was in Grundstufe. I could not speak Italian. He could not speak English. I had to learn German really fast. And it was my first time living on my own. And here I was in Germany. I just fell in love with Germany. And I knew that this was important for my goal of being a New Testament scholar. Very favorable impressions. Just last week, I think it was announced that Bonn was one of the top universities in the world and a center of excellence. So you can see that just all around. When I was in my final year at the university, my senior year, I lived in a dormitory where there was an exchange student from Germany who was a chemistry major, and he was from Bonn. He was studying at the University of Bonn, and I remember him talking about how famous Bonn was, not only as a city but also the university. So the university libraries are phenomenal. The Landesbibliothek here is a wonderful library, just also beautiful because it has a big glass windows. You see the Rhine and the Rhine ships, and it's really inspiring to study there. There are many institute libraries here. I've actually visited, for this summer, I visited 7 different institute libraries for the kind of research I do, which is very interdisciplinary, because I do history, I do literature, I look at classics, theology, and I've been able to find most everything I need. The faculty has been really helpful. Professor Harrill was my Gastgeber, my host, and he's been able to get me a research study space. There is this Ecumenical New Testament Seminar, or Ecumenical New Testament Society, which is a seminar that meets once or twice a month, where doctoranten and habilitanten give research papers, and I was able to present that to that as well. And so, very vibrant, active New Testament faculty, very vibrant, active university, and all of the research facilities I needed. So it was actually very good. Very good experience here. I mentioned that the language of scholarship, the Fachsprache, for the field of New Testament is German. That's changing. We recently had an international meeting of the Society for New Testament Studies, known as the SNTS. This was in Marburg in Germany, but the official language was English. I think 10 years ago it would be German. Usually it's in the language in which the host university is. I remember going to Montreal to the SNTS meeting, and the official language was French, for example. But now English has become the international language of scholarship. But we will always need to be able to read German if you're going to be a competent scholar, because not everything will be translated. I mean, most of the very good scholarship is actually old. If you look at commentaries, for example, and this is part of how the publishing industry has changed. I mean, book selling has really put a pressure on books to be sellable. You can't have footnotes. You can't really expect that only professors will buy the books, because we can't make money if that's the case. And so these older commentaries actually have a lot of very interesting detail that sometimes no one followed up. And so you have to be able to read German. So that's, so there is a change there. And the methodology of New Testament scholarship came from German theology. And the most important methodology was the break, or the divorce, of biblical studies from systematic theology, so that faith does not control the interpretation of the Bible. Dogma and theology doesn't determine what the exegesis of the text should be. But there are significant differences because I am a professor of history. I have a cognate appointment and a professor of classical studies. My university does not have a theology department. We don't even have a chapel. We're not allowed by law to have any institutional support of religion on campus because we are a land-grant state university. And because the university has a particular history as a land-grant university, this means this was a university founded in the late 19th century by a gift of land by the state. And the reason the university was created was to support the study of agriculture, engineering, and what we call the STEM fields now. And that's really the heart of the university is with the sciences and with engineering. And so the humanities is not as large. And so the university never created a religious studies department. So we don't even have a religion department. And so I have a PhD in New Testament and early Christian literature from the University of Chicago. But the academic specialty in which I was trained has no intellectual or institutional home at my university. So I have to kind of create my own space. And I do teach courses on Introduction to the New Testament, the historical Jesus, on Paul and his influence in early Christianity, but I also teach courses on ancient slavery and Introduction to the Discipline of History. And when I talk to my German colleagues, I think we realize the biggest difference between what my teaching and research methods are and theirs is that my teaching, research, and methods are not in the service of the church. We're not training pastors, and that affects your methodology, and that affects your teaching. And it really sometimes blows my colleagues' mind in Germany when I say I have 100 students in my Introduction to New Testament, and half of them are engineering students. And they're like, what? So it's a very different kind of teaching context. So I see myself very much a colleague with historians and classicists. And I do not actually identify myself as a theologian. I will say that one piece of advice for anyone coming here is that housing is tight. And the big trick is that you should apply for housing even before you know whether you got the fellowship, because you need to apply a year or more in advance. So if you don't get the fellowship, you can always cancel. But if you wait until you're accepted, you're not going to find housing. And that's the one thing that's very difficult, because you just don't have the space that we have in America, I suppose.